and I want to jump right over into live code to show you how you can kind of get started today on using Xamarin for cross-platform mobile development. So I'm going to change over my displays here. I'm going to say this is absolutely fantastic. I'm really excited. The last few shows that I've done, I got the amazing resolution of 1024 by 768. So I'm very, very happy that this is finally 1080p, so you can get the full pixel experience on these screens. So, okay, so here we go. Something familiar. This is Visual Studio 2013. We have a lot of 2013 users. Okay, quite a few. Good. I love 2013. It's fantastic. So many awesome new features. You know, I heard Carl and Richard talking about it earlier. So when they asked us to come on the roadshow with them, we kind of thought, and I kind of thought, like, what would be kind of a cool application to make? Well, they have a podcast. I might as well show off making a podcast streamer, right? So here it is, and throughout the whole demo, we're going to follow this master detail flow. So it's all going to be code. So if you want to get closer to the code, feel free to. I won't be upset if you want to get closer to the code on this. So I want to create a podcast streamer. I'm in my design view here. I'm going to start with the Windows Store application and build that out first. So on the left-hand side, I have a big list of all the podcasts that are going to come in. And then I have just some transport controls, my play, pause, and stop. So if I run this, let's see what this looks like. There we go. Nice big list here, and I can browse through them, click on one, get more detailed information, and just start playing back. Oh, got to turn on the volume. There we go.
Recorded live Friday, August 26th, 2011.
That's pretty great. I can pause. I can go ahead and scrub through if I wanted to, and I tied up a few different events here, which is pretty cool. Let's see if the internet's going well. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, this should work. So, there we go. Buffer. So I'm not doing anything too crazy. I don't know if you've done any Windows Phone development before, this is going to be a standard master detail flow. And over in my Solution Explorer, I just have a split page. Like, that's it, right? So I just have that one page. And in the code behind, if I look at what's going on here, I'll pull this up. I have those play buttons. Let's go ahead and select one here. Let's stop debugging. There we go. So I'm using just a media element just to play audio back. So when they select one, it'll go out, and it's pulling down a podcast feed online, and then it is basically turning that into a podcast, and then when I select one, I get more detailed information and present them. Then I have a play, pause, and stop button, and those are all tied up into my backend, my code behind, right? So if I look at the play click, I'm not doing anything too crazy here. I'm just going to the player, play, pause, stop, and then I actually have a timer that I'm updating the user interface, just, you know, to ensure that as the user is listening to the podcast, they're notified and they can adjust the scrub bar and things like that. So if I was just building the Windows Store application, I'd actually probably put all my data model and my HTTP client to actually go and grab all the podcast feed. I could probably just put it right inside of this project. But you know, we want to actually probably at some point maybe bring this to other platforms. So I could create link projects and do all this stuff, but now inside of Visual Studio there's portable class libraries. And right from inside of Visual Studio, when you select a new project, you'll have portable class library. And what's brand new here is that you'll see you'll be able to target, you'll be able to create one. Portable class libraries are amazing because you can create one project and target all of these clients, all of these platforms. And you develop against a set of .NET APIs, and you can deploy with one project, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. So in here, Windows Phone, Windows Store, Android and iOS applications. So now I can target pure all cross-platform with one portable class library. So I've already done that here, and I've taken the code for my data model and then some of my business logic up into my portable class library. So I have a podcast episode. This should look pretty familiar, right? It's just some getters and setters, some properties. Nothing too fancy there that's going to be displayed and bound to my user interface. And then I have a podcast fetcher. My podcast fetcher is pretty cool. You can see I have a nice XML or a feed that I'm going to parse. And I have basically 2 methods in here that I'm going to be using. Create an HTTP client. HTTP client's going to take that podcast URL, come down, parse the XML, turn it into my podcast episodes. I'm going to parse it as well. So I'm just going to parse it. Nothing crazy. If I wanted to, I could use the awesome new peak definition, even though it's in the same exact file. But I don't know, I love this. So I use it all the time. I'll probably use it about 1,000 times during this demo. And that's not a realistic number, so that's not real. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So I put some breakpoints in here and do it again. So now for my Windows Store application, I'm debugging into my portable class library. I've created my HTTP client, have my podcast URL. It goes out, grabs it. So we have this huge XML file. It'll parse it, and it returns 18 podcasts for me. And that's going to go and return and start it up into the user interface. So just through my Windows Store application, standard, just stepping through PCLs. So that's fantastic. I have the Windows Store application done. It's in the store. Users are loving it. But like I was talking about earlier, everyone has a different device, right? Not everyone has a Surface or a Windows 8 PC. They have Android, iOS, right? So let's go ahead and put this puppy on Android. So I'll just add a new project. And here, I'm just going to create a brand new Android project called dnr.droid. And there you go, right inside of Visual Studio. I have my Windows Store application, portable class library, and my Android application. So the very first thing I want to do is obviously leverage all of that code that I just wrote, right? So all I have to do is add a reference to my portable class library. Now all that data model and that HTTP client code that I wrote, it's all going to be available to me right away. So in Android, it's a little bit different. We follow, since Xamarin is a native application when it compiles at the end of the day, it follows the standard guidelines when creating Android applications. I'm just changing a few things here. There we go. So inside of our resource file, in our resource folder here, we have a few folders called drawable, layout, and then values. So drawables are like your images, your assets that you're going to add and use in your application. In Android, the layouts, they're XML-based, very similar to XAML on Windows Phone or Windows Store, but they're Android XML, and they go into the layout folders. And in Android, the user interface is completely decoupled. So you have an activity. So an activity is very similar to a page that you're navigating through, and activities can talk and navigate through that way. So an activity says, hey, I want to use this XML file, and everything has an ID, and you go out and grab it. And I'm going to show that as well. So that's where those layouts go. And then you have values. So the values could be strings, integers, anything like that. And that's just kind of how Android itself works. So with the Xamarin tools, inside of Visual Studio, you have a full Android designer. So as you can see here, the default application, when you add it, just has a hello world click me event. And what this is doing is behind the scenes is just creating the Android XML for you. So here is just a linear layout or a stack panel if you've done Windows Phone or Windows Store development, and there's a button that has some text on it. We don't care about the button though, but what we could do is add some more stuff in here. So if I wanted to, I could add some text. When I'm searching, I have a full toolbox here of Android controls that I can drop in here. Could add an image if I wanted to. So inside of here, you're getting the names, like this is called an image view, an image button, or a text view. That's what I'm adding in here. And then when I'm creating it, again, it's just going to simply create that XML for me behind the scenes. So there it is, right? I have this linear layout, some buttons, some text views, nothing too fancy. But what I really want is follow that master detail flow, right? So this first page, my vision is going to be a list of podcasts in here. So what I can do is delete all this stuff. And in Android, it's called a list view. So here's my list view. I'm just going to drag it in here. And what I can do is I can actually try to find it in here. I can see it's not, something's a little weird when I dragged it in there. And I can view all the properties here on the right-hand side. These are all the native properties that I can set on it. And here, there's layout width and layout height. And in Android, you can either wrap contents or kind of auto-size it, so it'll automatically size it for me. But I want to fill the whole screen. So there we go. We see that blue outline. So now I've gone ahead and filled that entire list view to fill the whole screen. So what I could do is I could go ahead and actually build out every single user interface, the items that are going to go in it, and the details page. But the amazing designers at Xamarin have already helped me out a little bit to style this up. So I have some of this code already here, just the layouts. So I have some images, I have some backgrounds, some play, pause buttons that I'm going to drag into my drawables. Some nice new icons. I also have some layouts. So I have 3 files that I'm adding. I'm going to be adding just in the detail on the item page, so we can update that. And I'll show you what all these look like as well, so it's not just trickery or magic that I'm doing up here. And then finally, there's the values folder. So Android is heavily styled. You can create styles for different versions or how you want it to look. So I created a light theme for this. And as I realized that different projectors do different things, this should look really good, actually. It's like a one-to-one. Sometimes the light theme isn't perfect for these. But let's take a look at the main. I haven't really done anything too crazy, but I have a light theme. And again, it's just filling up with the list view. And then I want to fill this with items. And in Android, each item has its own XML as well. It's its own different file. And you have this thing called an adapter. So an adapter's not quite an activity, but it's basically a representation of items, of views. So it calls GetView. It returns this XML, and it tells it to set the properties on each region. So here, I have an image, I have a title, and a description. I'll go into the adapter code, but it's kind of just the standard way that Android does stuff. Then I have the podcast details page. So I have a play, pause, stop button, very similar to my Windows Store application. And I want to go ahead and add a scrub bar and details. So when I'm on the first page, should be a list of those items that you saw, and then go ahead and fill us in. And of course, this is all just XML in the background. So if we look here, this is just a little bit more in depth with buttons. You can see I'm just referencing these actual icons that I want to use. So let's take a look here. So now that I have my images and my layouts and things like that in place, I want to actually go ahead and build out the back end of this application. So again, when it created the template, and add that in, it had just a main layout. It had that button on here, so you can see it's actually trying to reference my button. And then it creates a little delegate here for calling back and updating the UI. But we don't need that. I actually have this code already, so I have to go through all of it, but I'm going to go through all of it for you guys here. Let's go ahead and update that. So on this very first page, the very first thing I have to do is I have to grab that list view, and we do this find view by ID. So every single view has a specific ID that I can set, and I'm going to get it. And then here's that adapter. So this adapter is interesting. So I'm using this peak definition. If you haven't used Visual Studio 2013, this is the coolest thing in the entire world. It is crazy. I love it. But basically, you can reference no matter where you're at inside your solution. I was on there. You're very used to doing this, right? Go to definition. It's going to open up the page. That's annoying. Peak definition actually inline, and I can edit this file. It's super cool, and I can pin it. It's crazy. So inside of here, we can see exactly what's going on. I have a count. How many podcasts do I have? Well, what's really important to me is that I have this GetView, what I was talking about earlier. And it does very similar things. So it's going to update and inflate the user interface. And then down here, I'm going to update the text and description and the images based on the actual podcast that I have. So, and then I can just use some Lambda stuff here to create a click event. So when someone clicks on an item, I want to go ahead and grab that podcast. And in Android, it's a little bit different than a Windows Store or Windows Phone application for navigation. Everything is intent-based, so everything's pretty loosely coupled. So I say that I want to navigate to the detailed page. And I'm going to send you some information. And Android, I just want you to handle it. Just take me there. So that's what I'm going to do. So here it is. So this is the most important thing. And what I'm doing here is I'm going out and I'm creating a new podcast fetcher. This is from our PCL, right? And I'm calling get podcast async. And again, if I peek this definition, I'm peeking into the portable class library, so a whole nother project to view what's going on. This is the same code that you just saw, nothing special there. But what's important is that I'm using async await here. I'm using some really cool features, which means that I'm starting to create this I'm starting to build this out on the user interface thread, so the UI thread. I'm going to go out and make a web call. It's all going to be done in a background thread. It's all going to be handled for me automatically with async await. And then when it returns into here, when I inflate these podcasts and I do this notified data set changes, tells my adapter, hey, you have some new data, you should go update the view. That's going to happen on the UI thread. So it's actually eliminating tons of code, and it's having, for me to have to worry what thread or where I'm at on the UI thread. So if I set this as the startup project, we can actually debug this. So here's my Android emulator. If we have any Android developers or use Xamarin Developer and done some Android stuff, this is Genymotion. It's simply fantastic.
You didn't see me, I wasn't here.
Uh-oh.
You didn't see me,
I didn't see it. Well, it's debugging. It's deploying. We're good. Well, there you go. So now I'm actually debugging. So here I've launched into my Android application, and I've hit my first breakpoint here in my Android project to get the podcast async. I can simply step into that code. Right? I'm stepping into my portable class library like I just did on Windows Store. I can go, it's the same URL. I grab the string, pull it down, parse the podcasts. I can pin this here. Parse my podcasts. I have 18 of them. Then I return it up to the UI to update and inflate my views. And here I'm getting the native look, feel of this list view and reuse because it is a native application. So here I can go in, select a podcast, get details of it, start playback.
693 with guests Nat Friedman and
Hopefully you can hear it a little bit. Yeah.
Recorded live Friday, August 26th.
I can pause, I can skip forward and back because I've implemented that functionality and browse the details. When I'm talking about native application, I'm also talking about them taking advantage of some platform-specific functionality, right? So up here you see this little share button up here, and this is actually into the Android action bar, which is very common in Android applications nowadays. So inside of here, when I select this, I've implemented the share provider intent, basically, that allows to tie into this action bar, and this is going out, and I said, I want to share some text. I want to share, and I want to tell my friends about this podcast. So it goes out on my emulator, on your device. It's going to find anything that can accept text and share it. So if I wanted to, I could share it and tweet this out. This is Tweedle, one of my favorite Twitter clients. I can tweet that out, and it comes right back into my application. So I'm actually cross-communicating between Android applications. So what I'm doing in the background, if I go into the detail activity, it's very, very similar to what we saw over on Windows Store, right? I go and I'm finding some buttons, play, pause, stop. I go out and I prepare my media player. So we had a media element before, now we're using a media player because that's how Android plays back audio. And then I'm setting up the play and pause and stop handlers. So it's nothing too crazy. It's very familiar because this is what happens and how it works on each platform. So right there I have my Android application and Windows Store application all using the same data model, all using all that code that I wrote for the HTTP client to pull that down and parse it and update the user interface. All inside of Visual Studio with all the debug and all the features that you get with that. So that's pretty awesome. But wouldn't it be great if I could actually go ahead and create an iPhone application right inside of Visual Studio as well? So I could go ahead and I could do the same exact thing, the same dance over and over again. But I'm going to go ahead and add in the iOS application that I've created ahead of time, and I'll walk through that as well. So here we go. I have an Android, iOS, portable class, and Windows Store project all inside of one solution in Visual Studio. And they're all referencing that DNR.portable library that I created. So iOS is a little bit different than the other one. So what we're going to see here is I've created all my user interface in the backend. So everything's kind of hidden. I'm just adding it in pragmatically. And in iOS, everything is done a little bit differently. So you create your interfaces with UI kit. That's what Apple has. It has the UI kit, and they have their controls: UI label, UI table view, or table view, UI collection view, things like that. And in iOS, the navigation, while we had activities in Android or pages in Windows Phone, everything is a UI view controller. So that's how they navigate across is view controllers. And I've created 2 of them here. The first one is my podcast controller. So again, master detail flow. That's going to be my list. That's going to be a collection view. And then I have this podcast detail controller, which I'll be navigating to when I select one. And then I have that cell. So very similar, right? You have cell, detail page, controller. So you should be able to set this as my startup. And what's interesting here is if I go into my podcast controller, I'm just creating some user interface here, and I have a list of podcasts, and I'm even doing some search functionality specific. So I have a nice collection view, and I want to be able to filter it if someone wants to search for a specific topic. And then here I'm using a UI collection view controller. So it's just a view controller with basically a list in a collection view. So it's very similar to a table view or list view. Lets you do some cool layout things. So I set up my user interface, and the most important part is this method here that I created, this guest podcast async. So just like you saw before, I have I'm doing the same thing. I have an activity view. It's a little spinner on the screen that's going to rotate, kind of tell my users that, hey, stuff's going on. Just hold on a second. Wait a second, And then I create a podcast fetcher. I go and get podcast async. And then here again, since I'm using async await, I start on the UI thread to start that spinner. I come back, stop and update it on the UI thread. And I can go right into the podcast fetcher, and I have those breakpoints in there. So I'm going to pull up, and hopefully this works. The Wi-Fi is never 100%. So let's take a look at using some AirPlay stuff. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Oop. Sometimes you just got to restart. This is the coolest thing ever when it works. I believe, luckily enough, my iPhone actually just crashed and restarted. So that's a thing that just happened. Let's see here. That was fun. There's always a first time for everything at every single event, I say. So let's see if this goes and ties up to the Wi-Fi, if I have to do it manually.
So does that work for the iPhone and the tablet?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You can create just a, so inside of, as I try to get this up here, you can just go in and create a new project, just like we did for Android, and you have an iOS. And you can create specifically for iPad, iPhone, or a universal application, no matter whatever you want to do. So you just optimize the user interface for each of them. Let's take a look here. Let's try to launch this one more time. See if I am connected. Oh, worst comes to worst, I can always do my camera trick, which is, you'll see my face even more. It'll go right into my face. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and try to reconnect to the internet and see if that works real quick. Maybe. So all I'm trying to do is just bring up the Android. There's a screen mirroring application called Reflector that I use to actually AirPlay the device to my Windows PC. And when it works, and it always works for me at home, but apparently never on stage, it actually works very well, just through AirPlay. But we'll just do it the old-fashioned way, I guess, and see if it happens to pop up halfway through. So I set my iOS application up. see here. Oh, I might have disconnected from the internet on one of them. So I'm actually connecting to my Mac build host here, and it's going to connect and link up to my Mac. And it's just sitting over here, not doing much besides just building my application. We'll see if I'm connected. So it's one of those fun things when everything works about 5 minutes before the show over there, and then you come over here and it doesn't work. So hopefully this is the most that you'd ever have to see of the pairing process between your Windows PC and your Mac. Let's see here if this is going to connect. It might be. Let's see if I have internet. I do. That's good. Ah, I'm connected. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Still no AirPlay apparently, but there we go. So now I can go ahead and build this up. So I've connected to my Mac build host that's sitting off, and I see up here I have my iPhone that's here, and that's pretty awesome. And we can start debugging. Maybe. So this is going to go out. It's remotely grabbing it and deploying to my iPhone. I've hit that breakpoint on my iPhone. So here I am, just nothing really special here, and I'll point it up at the screen. What's important here is that as I continue and step through, I'm hitting those same exact breakpoints in my portable class library on my iPhone over here. Of course, the Wi-Fi is not going to work with me, so we'll see how this works. See, we'll try it one more time, but fantastic. So hitting the breakpoints as I step through, going out, getting the podcast feed, and I'll show you what this looks like. I grab that feed just like we've seen before, parse the podcasts, and return it to the UI. So let's see what that looks like over here. I'm going to try AirPlay one more time if that worked. That'd be amazing. Nope. So I can go to camera. That's how I did one demo. It was pretty cool. And you see me. So even more of me. So here we go. I can tilt at an angle. So we can see we have the entire iOS application. I can go in and select one here. And on the bottom, I have some transport controls that I'm going to press.
.NET Rocks episode 914.
There we go. So. So that's a really great example of how I'm now using the same exact portable class library to pull down this podcast feed, share it between Android, iOS, and my Windows Store application, right? And I'm greatly improving. And if I have to fix some bugs, so for instance, I was actually doing something very similar. I was at a Nokia hackathon last Saturday doing some Windows Phone development. I was messing around with HTTP client, and I was going to catoverflow.com, which is the coolest website ever if you like cats. And who doesn't? So I was pulling down, I was getting a random image, right? And I was like, man, why is this returning the same image over and over again? And I had it in my Android application and my Windows Phone application. I was using one PC. I was like, this is the simplest form. It was just, I'm going to go grab an image. So sending these files, I'm having people test it, and it doesn't work for them either. I'm like, great. So I start messing around on the PCL, and I start messing around, and I figure I have to set a few properties to just basically ignore all cache and don't cache anything. So I fix the bug once, and then I fix it on all my clients, right? All from the PCL, and that's what's kind of cool. So here we go. We have Android, iOS, and Windows Store, and that's awesome. And you're like, James, that's cool. You got apps in all marketplaces. That's fantastic. But what would be a killer feature to add to this application? Well, what would be really cool is if we could, we probably have some users that might have iPhones and Windows 8 tablets. What if I was to start playback on one of those devices, start listening to the podcast, pause it, come home and start listening to that podcast later, right? You'd probably expect that nowadays at a podcast streamer. So I can actually do that. And Microsoft has Azure Mobile Services. If you haven't heard of it, I'm pretty sure they'll tell you about it every single day. Tell you as much as humanly possible. But Azure Mobile Services is cool. And it's really cool to me because this was the first time I ever did it, and I did it in about a day or less to get all this in there. And first time ever setting up anything Azure, and I was pretty blown away because it's all made for cross-platform development, no matter what you're on. So for Azure, I've actually created an Azure Azure web service down here. So there it is. It's going to be my helper class. I'm adding it into my PCL, right? Because I want to actually reuse all of that Azure code that I'm going to write. So let's take a look at that. And here it is, my Azure web service. Now, it's very important that nobody steals that key. Don't take a picture of it because that's my key for the next 2 months in demo, so please don't steal that. So I've created a mobile service client. If you haven't used Azure before, you basically create a mobile service client, and everything's sort of stored in tables, and it's all JSON. So I'm actually, in here, I'm using Newtonsoft, JSON.net. If you've never used JSON.net, it's amazing for serializing and deserializing JSON in and out of C# objects. So that's why you saw here, you saw these JSON properties. So I'm actually going to store this show number. I'm going to synchronize with the show number up into the cloud, and I'm going to store that. So I just created 2 methods. I have a getTime async where I pass it in the show number, and then I have I go and I get the table, and I say, hey, I'm going to create this link query, and based on my show number, Azure do the hard work, find it for me, and return me a collection asynchronously, right? And then I return that back out. And then I have a save time async that I'm going to actually pass in a podcast episode and save it. I'm saving everything in seconds up there. So this code was actually, I already actually utilized it in my podcast episode, and what I hid from you guys as well. Apparently I'm hiding lots of things today, but I actually implemented a little helper method, a little async helper in my actual data model to save time async and get time async. So it's going to basically go ahead and call my instance of the Azure Web Service and save the time. And then it updates the IDs because IDs are based. So if I haven't stored anything yet, it doesn't have an ID, a unique identifier up in Azure. And Azure will return that to me when it comes back down if I've saved it or I've updated or added it. And the same thing down here for getTime async. And what I can do is I'm returning null. So that's bad. It's not good. So we can delete that. And that's why it didn't work before, is because I was returning null. We don't want to do that. We're gonna make sure that I delete it from both because that wouldn't make for a good demo. And since I'm having a little bit of issues with the Wi-Fi, I'm going to go ahead and just do it in the Android application here. And let's go ahead and add that functionality in there. So inside of my first activity, or when I select a podcast, I'm going to navigate, right? So here I'm navigating over to that podcast detail activity. And when I go into the podcast detail activity, like I said, you've already seen a lot of this code I showed you earlier. I go out, I hit up, and I connect up all of the functionality I want. But here's what I'm doing. I'm going to call my current podcast episode to call getTime async. And that's going to go ahead and peek in, and we're going to see we're peeking in. Can I peek inside of a peek? Oh, no, I can't, but that would have been so cool. So at least, you know, you're peeking and peeking even more, but I wish they would have. That would have been cool. Next version, I guess. So there we go. So I'm just calling that PCL code. And then, you know, see right here, right? I was returning null before, so it didn't do anything. But in here, I'm actually going to go ahead and the player takes, I think, milliseconds, so I convert that over, and I update the podcast player. So I'm going to start up that emulator again that I just happened to close like 5 seconds ago. So I want to do that, but while that's starting, I also want to implement a save button too. So down on the bottom, I want to put in a save progress. Whoa, look at that. That code is already written. That's, whoever wrote that ahead of this conference is absolutely, that's fantastic. So I have a save progress, and this is going to go, and it's going to put it in next to that share icon. I always want it to be next to that share icon. Just for demo purposes, you probably want to actually synchronize it automatically, right? But for demo purposes, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then when that's pressed, I'm gonna call save time async So let's go ahead and go over there, and it's got some breakpoints, and that's good. That sounds perfect. So here we go. We got my Android emulator back up. Now we can start debugging again. So I'm expecting now, as long as I've gone ahead and cleared out that Azure database table ahead of time, I'm hoping that I did about 20 minutes ago, and there shouldn't be anything in there, right? So let's take a look. You never know. So again, it's going to hit those breakpoints. I'm going to get rid of these because I forgot to clear those out. So here we go. So now I'm back over here, and let's find, I think there's Nat Friedman and Miguel, they gave a talk. Whoa, that's not good. Good thing we're debugging and figuring out what's going on here. So that is intriguing. Do I? It shouldn't be in there. It sounds like it has some issues in here. Oh, did I actually do something down in here wrong? Oh, you know what the problem is? Didn't reference my Azure stuff, so that's not good. So let's add some references. Now, even though I'm creating all the Azure in my PCL, there's still a few platform-specific things. So they basically have extension methods, right? Good thing I remembered that. So, and I'll actually use that later. So I'm going to browse for some of these. I have some Android-specific ones. Boop. And now, hopefully, let's give it a go. Good thing. Remembered those. There's little extension methods, and I'll show exactly why those are being used. So again, since I wasn't calling those methods and just returning null, it didn't actually get to create and actually try to create my Azure mobile service. So let's find one. Here's building games. There we go. It didn't crash. That's fantastic. So I've gone out, and nothing's in there. I should have been able to put a breakpoint right here. Let me navigate back and forth so we can see my building games in .NET. So in this instance, I'm getting null back from my getTime async, so nothing's happening, and I can go ahead and continue through. Get it again for some reason. Let's see. So I can go out to my Azure Web Service, and there's not going to be anything in here, so that's good. Let's start listening to it.
.NET Rocks episode 910.
I'm going to scrub up and see how far we can get. Buffer. There we go. Perfect. So I've scrubbed up to about 27 minutes or so. And here's that little action. I said never show the icon because I don't think I added an icon, but I want to just hit save progress. This is going to go up and call my save time async. And there we go. It's updated. And now it has a unique identifier. It has 1610 as my current time. And then it has a specific 20,008 is my specific ID. And that's cool. So now that's saved. And now even navigating back and forth, when I grab this podcast, when it returns down from Azure, you'd probably want to do a little spinner or something like that, right, when it pulls it down. Azure being a little slow, let's see. Maybe. There it is. So now I actually have one podcast. And that podcast, I'm pretty sure I debugged back here. Yep. Cool. So it comes back out, and now I've synchronized. There was nothing there before. Now there is because I push it up to Azure, and it comes back down, and it tells me that, hey, you need to skip to 1610. And my user interface will reflect that. Right? Start playback. And that's pretty cool. So I've synchronized that, and now I can do the same exact thing over on the Windows Store application as well. And I've also hidden in my split page, you probably saw it earlier, but I have the save button here that I actually have collapsed. So not doing anything too crazy, but I have a save click, and I'll make that visible. And then I have a save click. So when I go and I look at save click and the code behind, where is it at? Oh, save click. This again is going to call save time async. It's going to save it up based on my player position. And then I also have a get time async in here somewhere. There it is. So when I select the item, a few things are happening here. I'm going through, I'm initializing the player, and then I'm going to call get time async. So if I go ahead and debug this again, and go down to the mono game one, here we go. So I go out, I make that call to Azure, and that was snappy, and I have one podcast, that's awesome. And here it is. I'm returning that same item down, right? So I synchronize it in Android, it's coming into my Windows Store application, same ID, same time. I can update the user interface now and just start playback between clients. And you're like, James, that is the best demo I've ever seen ever. And I'm glad that you think that. But then you're like, wait a minute. You're doing something a little bit tricky there, because what happens when thousands of people download this application from the store? Everyone's going to start listening to podcasts, and it's going to be connecting up, and the podcasts are going to go crazy, right, with time synchronization. Because, James, you didn't put any user-specific stuff in there, right? Well, what if we could? And in fact, we can. So let's do it. With Azure Mobile Services, it allows you to use a bunch of different authentication methods. You could use your own, but built in is Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, and a few others, I think, in there too. And they're just OAuth 2 authentications per user. Now, what I did ahead of time, I'm not going to lie, guys. I came in here, and there's another number I don't want you to steal, is especially this big current user. So I found I have two users, Xamarin DNR1 and Xamarin DNR2, and this is the first one. And I was debugging, so I just grabbed it out of there, right? And now that number is not very important, but this super huge, super long token is, look at that. Look at it go, yeah. Look at that. That thing is an impressive OAuth token. Yeah, so it keeps going, and that's really fantastic. But we want to go ahead and comment that out. We don't want that because we want to go ahead and actually allow our users to log into our application. So I can do that. And I can do that, and I want to do it before I actually create and pull in that podcast feed. So down below, look at all those lines that you didn't see before. I created an authenticate method. And so the reason I had to add, and now I added those manually into my references as Azure. Those are all in NuGet. You can just pull in the NuGet file. It's no big deal. But I just wanted to make sure I had a backup locally just in case Wi-Fi issues for this. You never know. So we're doing this a little bit different. I go through and I want to ensure that my users are logging in. So if the current user is null, I want to go and ask them to authenticate, right? And probably if I was smart, I would probably actually save that token, and I'd probably store this information around in a very secure location in some setting in each device, right? That's what you're going to want to do. But what I want to do here is go ahead and call login async. So this login async is for each platform. It's going to pop up the native user interface for each one, and I'm going to log in with Twitter here as well. So let's see if this thing builds first, or if I'm missing more references. I am. I think there's also a reference for this. Just add those for good measure. There we go. I can resolve that reference. So here we go. Now I'm using the Twitter authentication. And then I'm going to pop up a little toast dialog, a little message to my user to tell them that they've logged in. But of course I want to use this. So let's put it up here. And this is async. It's all async awaitified. So I can just simply say await, authenticate, boom. And now we're going to go ahead and pop up some dialog boxes and have them log in. Now, of course, you wouldn't run into that issue of the different references that I had to add if you're using the NuGet, because that would just come in automatically for you, right? So here, it's going to pop up with an authenticate dialog for me. And I'm going to log in with the same user that I did before. If you're really fast, most likely you can see my password that I did. Is that fast enough? We'll see. Yeah. So we'll log in, and don't remember me right now. Oh, cool, I'm logged in with 2191, that's important. So I want to make sure that in my Azure Web Services or my details page, all right, we got a breakpoint here. So this is the same user as I used before. So I should be able to now go in, go up to Azure, ask for that podcast back down for the user that I've logged in with. And here we go. Updated. One podcast. And this is the same user ID that I was specifying before, but now I'm using authentication properly, and that's good. That's good for your users. So there we go. Back to my emulator, and I've synchronized the time. But what if I didn't? Let me stop it and restart it here. What if I log in with a different user this time, right? Let's go ahead and check out Xamarin DNR2. So again, since I didn't save that token around, apparently it's gonna log me in automatically. That is good. That is almost too good. That's not good. How do I log out? I click don't save in. Let's check this out. Let's see if I can, to make this demo really good, let's see if I can go ahead and, oh no, what's going on here? Let's see if I can log out of Twitter. I'm still in my debug session, so that's good. Yeah. Oh, I'm not even signed in. Azure Mobile Services is so good that it knows that you want to keep logging in. I'm sure there's a log out. Well, let's just go do it over on Windows Store. Oh. It's a good one. It's probably cached. Let's do it. Uninstall. Oh. Okay. Good point. I like that. Let's do it. Or is it even so good? No, I'm just kidding. That would be crazy if that just, yeah. Nope, there, yeah, perfect. So here I can now log in, DNR2. Super fast, let's see. Not now, don't ever remember. Oh no, I typed it wrong. Yeah, nice and, let's try again here. Everyone's trying to figure it out. I heard you. What did he just type? What did he just do? I've done the same thing at other ones, and I've yet to have to reset the password. I trust everyone in this room, also because there's no tweets from it. Maybe the ones that I sent from here. So now I go into the same exact podcast. I'm going to pull it down. Wait for Azure to return back to me. Nothing. It's not good. Well, it's perfect, actually, because now it's a different Twitter user, right? So perfect. My code worked. Awesome. That's fantastic. OK. So that's great. James, that's awesome. You have it in Android. What about the other platforms you're asking? I know you are. Well, let's go to Windows Store. And what do you know? Lo and behold, whoever created this project actually put an authenticate method down here. That's fantastic for this demo. So exactly the same thing, but here I'm doing something a little bit different in my code. Is I'm actually creating a message dialog to pop up to the user when they log in. But again, I'm still calling the Azure, the authentication on Twitter into my application. And I created a method up here called LoadState. So this goes out, and in my data source that I created just for the sample, it goes out and it calls getPodcast. But I'm going to go ahead and wait, authenticate again. I'm going to use that. And did I say this is a startup project? Sure did. Let's log in. Perfect. I do know that Windows 8 does not remember my stuff. So let's see. DNR. Let's do 1 again to see if it's synced up. And I didn't save it on DNR2 either, so we should be able to see that. So, can't see any of it unless I press that button. Perfect. So I'm logged in again. Awesome message to my user. Select that, I go off again and synchronize it between the two. This is the first user again. There we go, synchronizing again. You're like, James, what about DNR user 2? He's sad. So let's do that. Let's log in again with DNR user 2. I'm logged in here. That's the emulator. I apologize for this location service pop-up. So I'm logged in again with my user 2. And I'm going to start playback. 2 seconds, maybe 3 if it rounds up. And then I'm going to save the progress. Okay. So here, I should be able to now start and log in with my Xamarin DNR2 user. Unless it tries to be awesome and log me in as well. Nope. Xamarin DNR2. One time I started typing the password and I said it out loud, and that wasn't good. That wasn't. So here we go. Now I've got my second podcast. Should come back. Has 1. And lo and behold, it's at 2 seconds with a different ID and a different user ID as well. So there you go. There is taking portable class libraries and using your C# knowledge and love and bringing it to Android, iOS, and all the Windows platforms. I encourage you to get started today with a full 30-day trial. Everything you saw here today, you can do. In fact, that bit.ly down there is the code minus all of the codes and things like that. But I do have the how-to guides to get your own Azure mobile services set up. It just takes a few minutes. But that bit.ly has all the source code for you. And of course, I'm huge on Twitter. As you can see, I use a Twitter auth. We're also huge on Twitter, Xamarin HQ. We have blog, I write, everyone else writes for it. We have great content to get you up and running and creating beautiful cross-platform mobile applications in C#. I am at James Montemagno. That's me on Twitter. When I'm not tweeting pictures of all the little stuffed monkeys that you probably grabbed earlier from the show and where they're traveling all over the world, I'm also writing about code all the time. I am not just a developer evangelist, but I am a developer, and I love talking to developers. I want to talk to everyone. If you're using Xamarin or you're looking to get into Xamarin and cross-platform, I want to talk to you. I just love it because I want to see what you're working on. I want to see what issues you're running into, and I'll help you solve them. That's what I'm here for. So just reach out to me on Twitter, and thank you for coming.